Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Patriot Party, where truth, transparency, and constitutional principles come before politics. The Patriot Party movement is focused on re-empowering we the people, restoring accountability, and putting America first through honest conversations and real solutions. America first, not America only, because America leads by example. Today's guest brings a rare combination of frontline healthcare experience, education, leadership, and public service. Dr. Nelva Lee is the founder and CEO of Medical Interpreting Trade School and has spent more than 20 years working inside the healthcare system. She was appointed by Governor Brian Kemp to serve with the Georgia Department of Community Health, giving her firsthand insight into how government decisions affect real families. She's also running for Georgia Superintendent of Schools with a focus on strengthening education while putting students and parents, not systems, first. Dr. Lee, welcome to the Patriot Party.
Thank you so much for having me on, Matt. Thank you for that amazing bio introduction.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you've spent decades working directly with patients, families, and communities. From your perspective, where do large systems start to drift away from the people they're supposed to serve?
Anytime you have a top heavy organization where you have more of the resources going to the administrators instead of the frontline people, that is when you have a system that's breaking down. And we see that in healthcare, we see that in education. And it really takes leadership. It takes someone with leadership to say, we're going to trim down the fat from the top and make sure that the resources are going to the people that need it the most.
Have you found that you get some pushback because the people at the top are the ones that make the decisions and they don't want to trim themselves down? Kind of like term limits with our politicians. They're never going to vote on that.
That is exactly the case. And I'm, by the way, a strong proponent of term limits. But you know what? We put them in office and we can definitely make sure that their term limits are imposed at some point. I don't know if you've heard of Convention of States. It's a uh, you know, uh, grassroots organization that is going state by state to ensure that we get term limits on the ballot, and it can be done through a constitutional amendment. And so, we the people still
It
have
can,
power.
and actually, we've absolutely. Oh no, absolutely. This whole movement is about that. We have a pipeline to DC with an educator, an advocate, and a strategist who's a constitutional lawyer who works for us and for the people by extension. Because for years, special interest groups, big companies, they have full time representation. Why shouldn't we, the people, have full time representation?
Well,
And to what you're saying, we actually have a strategy for that. It's a 5 to 10 year plan, but the states can request a limited constitutional convention, and then that's where the people will decide to put that on.
that's
So we actually have a plan for that. It's funny that you mentioned that.
that is correct.
So I got another question for you. Kind of follow up on this first question. Was there a moment when you realized that real reform wouldn't come from talking points, but from people willing to challenge the system from inside?
That's, throughout history we've seen that, Matt. Anytime you have real reform happen with any movement, it always takes leaders and that are bucking the system and that are willing to challenge the
Hmm.
status quo. It's always the case. Our country was founded by such leaders, right? That they decide to buck the system.
Yes,
They put their own lives on the line because they believe so strongly in democracy. And so every single time that we've had any reform in this country, it's been from leadership. It only takes a few people and then it starts swelling because oftentimes we just need a few people with courage to put their necks out there, and then everyone else is going to be like, yep, I'm really for that as well.
absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I really like what you're saying. So I got another question. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. So on this show, America First means leadership by example, putting families, workers, and communities ahead of bureaucracy. How does that principle guide your approach to both healthcare and to education?
Right. I really like to say to everyone that I have an advocacy gene that I don't know if others have. It's just the way that I've been built. And everything that I do is with the idea of, advancing freedom and justice and equal, access for everyone. That being said, everything has its place, right? So I'm all about God first, family second, and everything else comes after that. And so if you keep your priorities straight, you're able to get things done. I truly believe that. It might not happen in the timeline that you want it to. I often, things often takes time and oftentimes takes longer than you had expected. But if you stay persistent and you keep at it, especially if you get a groundswell support, and usually that takes a while, right, to build that. But normally we can see changes. The arc of justice is long, but it does happen.
Absolutely. 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 And too, we have to look back and we have to learn from history, because if we don't learn from it, we're doomed to repeat it. And I tell people all the time, you being an educator, you may be familiar with this, but the longest lasting republic thus far in history is Rome. And it outlasted us by, I think, roughly about 4 or 5 times what our age as of right now. And do you know the 2 biggest things that caused the collapse of Rome?
I believe that they did it to themselves. It was an inward collapse, right?
It was, but it was political corruption, and it was mainstream media back then because of misinformation, propaganda, rumor mills. That's what caused it to collapse. And I mean, if we don't do something now, we're headed in that direction because everything is so polarized and divisive that they're trying to split we the people, and we have to come back together.
Definitely. I oftentimes will tell, especially my close friends and family members, turn off social media, turn off the mainstream news, because all they're doing is spewing fear mongering, and that leads to division. Because when people are afraid and their cortisol levels are high, they're making very poor decisions. And so we really need to go back to the days where we could disagree without being disagreeable, where we could sit down and have discourse and say, okay, that's an interesting point. That's an interesting opinion. And let's see where we have middle ground. So definitely, I can see easily how the corruption led to Rome's demise. And definitely, if we're serious about election reform, we need to make sure that we start with term limits. That is the first and foremost thing that we need to do. And then from there, we can reform all the other things, financial reform, etc.
Well, and if you look back on it, I had a guest say this to me, and I've said it a few times. If you look back on it, when the country was founded, and George Washington or whoever, they would leave the farm to go to Washington and make the country a better place, and then they went back to the farm. Nobody wants to go back because they get to live like a rock star. And as far as the media. The media, I didn't realize that people who record clips for the media, they farm out and cut those clips depending on which way they want to spin, the media wants to spin it. So they don't report the whole story. They report to their agenda. And as you said on the political discourse and the civil discourse, not even political, just civil discourse, without breaking down into cursing, or we got families that won't even have Thanksgiving or Christmas together because of who's being voted for who. That's a shame. Why can't we say we agree to disagree? I mean, that's why our program with the American Institute for Civic Leadership, we're working with Louisiana educators right now, and they are aligning it fully, just doing a little bit of editing the high school and the middle school, so they can use it as supplemental programs into their curriculum, because it aligns perfectly until we can get full adoption in the parishes. But what we've done in the curriculum is we have introduced civil discourse and debate. So starting in middle school, one side gets given, and the hot topics are saved for high school once they've been trained in debate. But starting at middle school, one side gets given a historical topic, the conservative side, the originalist side. The other gets given the living document side. They debate it without cursing. The teacher acts as a coach to keep things civil. And then we see in middle school what resonates best, the living Constitution, the originalist, and they can start to make informed decisions and learn how to debate again. Our politicians have lost it. Look what happens when we see what's going on in the Capitol, where they break down cursing and calling each other names and eyelashes and this and that. It's crazy.
Yes, it is. Absolutely crazy. Yeah, we definitely didn't send them up there for that, for sure.
No, no, we didn't. No, we didn't. So, how do you gratitude or have gratitude and responsibility? How do they show up in policy decisions when they're done right?
Here's the thing. I believe that as a public servant, right, that the word servant should be front and center, right? Every public servant should remember that they are there to serve. And it's really been turned around, in the last few decades. Whereas, they spend much more time with lobbyists than they do with their constituents, right? You have to fight. Oftentimes constituents have to be part of a lobbying firm just to be seen by their representatives. And that's definitely not what we the people is all about, right? We have representatives. They should take their time and energy to meet with the people. But really and truly, everything has been turned topsy-turvy. From the federal level, state level, even on the local level. We're not having the representation that we should. Definitely, we're not being able to have discourse as before, as you mentioned, and the responsibility, right, of those representatives has to be what's best for the majority of my constituents, and not just the ones that voted for me. Really, for all of my constituents, what's best for all of my constituents. That is what we sent you in office to do. But that's not what we're seeing.
No, we're not. Let me give you a personal example of what happened with my representative with the health care bill that is now in the top three in D.C. with Thune and Johnson as it sits, because it is designed with our federal policy producing software where you can take an idea and our AI has parameters, guardrails to make it constitutional. Anyway, and with the click of a button, that's what we're working on scaling up as an educational tool for competitions and in school and for the people to turn kitchen table discussions into ready legislation, a ready bill built off of data points, not donors. And what's smart is for the American people. So, like, we just let me tell you what happened. So this movement kind of picked up traction quicker than it was a year ahead of what I had planned. So we started with a series called Fixing America podcast, where we had one of America's thought leaders on. To what we were supposed to do was theoretically talk about fixing some of today's biggest issues on how to theoretically fix them. So I built that software for our flagship legislation, which was to create a constitutional quality control board that laws have to go through so they are constitutional from the start, and it make it transparent as a learning tool as well. But when I built the software, it was there. So the guy comes on my show and he's got a way, they're trying to figure out what to do with Obamacare to replace it. Well, he's got a way to replace it, save the American people $2 trillion a year. $2 trillion a year by using state-run HSA savings accounts that are high interest and roll over. So, hey, if you stay healthy, you get wealthy, no matter what your income.
I love that.
And then, see, I didn't realize the third-party system took $3 trillion of the $5 trillion, and it's just red tape. Well, with this bill, it shrinks it. It uses it for catastrophe insurance and chronic illness insurance, and people who absolutely cannot afford health care or do not have jobs. And then it uses HSA accounts, and we've run all the stress tests. And anyway, so I contact my representative. I had his personal email. I met him at one of my daughter's jiu-jitsu matches. She trains MMA. I met him years ago, and he gave me his email. So I emailed him. with the healthcare because they needed something. And it was all in the news. He's in a
Right.
corner. Da 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 da. So they email me back, and his chief of staff sets up a conference, a video conference. We go on. I have everything in line, what we're doing. I haven't even opened up a DC location yet or hired a full constitutional lawyer advocate in DC. She comes on. She's all hyped up. Says, right going into Thanksgiving. She said, "Well, I'm going to come up with a strategy on who you need to contact and how you need to do it." After Thanksgiving, she contacts me and says, "Sorry, it's not in Washington format. There's nothing I can do." And so I sent it back a minute later in Washington format, the click of a button away, and she never contacted back. And that's meant to stop. I don't know if it's because of donors. I don't know what it is. But how many Americans would stop when their representative, when they have an answer and they brought it to their representative?
Right.
Now, we didn't. We opened up a DC location. We paid somebody to go to their office in the Capitol and represent true We the People legislation that's built on data points and not donors. But most people wouldn't do that.
Right.
And
That
and we're trying to bridge that gap because there is a gap in between the politicians and a lot of it is lifetime appointments. There's no way, even if you maybe don't do term limits, but they have to rotate out. You can serve twice. You have to live back in the community for so many years. That way you don't get so disconnected. It's like living in Hollywood. You're not living in the real world.
that way you're not beholden to lobbyists, because right now
Right.
they spend much more time meeting with lobbyists and much more time fundraising than they do the
Hmm.
work that we're actually sending them there to do.
Absolutely. 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 So you've had a front row seat to healthcare at every level.
Correct.
What's the biggest gap between what policymakers believe is happening and what patients actually experience?
For me, I believe the number one issue that we're having on the ground level is the insurance, the red tape with insurance. Insurance has gotten out of hand, especially in the last couple of decades, where everything just gets denied from the hospital level, physicians, providers. Everything gets denied, and then you have to resubmit. It's almost like a game. You expect it to be denied, or you expect that if you submit a claim, it's going to get clawed back later, and then you still have to resubmit and resubmit. It's becoming it's a game, really, where the insurance companies are meant to win at this game. And it's decimating rural hospitals. It's decimating, um, you know, primary care physicians because they don't have the staff needed to just continually resubmit and reclaw back and do the research. And insurance companies know this. So really, on the ground level, we are seeing everybody really hurting. Patients are hurting, right? They're not getting the care that they need. They're not getting the services that they're needing. The only ones that are getting rich from the healthcare system is the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies. That's it. And so
Yeah,
we need true reform.
yeah, and that's why with the with a lot of these doctors are liking this legislation that we have because if you get a cash price from a doctor, it's normally 40 to 60% less than the insurance price because there isn't all that red tape with the people like you're saying. So what these HSA accounts do is they allow direct payment from the person who's being treated to the treater and take that completely out. So there's not all that red tape and it's not, pressing people out. And my wife, she's a nurse practitioner and I hear it all the time. They hate insurance companies practicing medicine without a medical license because they tell them what they can prescribe and
Oh
won't
yeah.
let them prescribe what needs to be prescribed.
Or who needs to go to what specialist? It's like the doctor's telling you he needs to go to a cardiologist. No, we don't believe that. And so if you send them anyways, then you're going to be the patient's going to either eat that cost or the provider.
If you could implement one practical reform that improves care without massive new spending, is there anything that comes to the top of your head?
Three things, but for one,
Oh.
we are the only developed nation that allows prescription advertisements on our TVs. Do you know that? The only.
I have
The
heard
only
something like that. I didn't know the only, but
we are the only developed nation that allows that, and there's a reason why the others don't. It's because it leads to this whole idea that patients know best, know more than the doctors. I strongly advocate for you to be knowledgeable of your own health care and to be armed with information before you go to see a doctor. Strongly recommend that. But when you're going to your doctor with a prescription prescribed by the TV, that is not health care. Okay? And that all that does is enriches the pharmaceutical companies. Right? Second thing that I would do so I would get rid of that. That's an easy executive order. No more. That's no longer allowed. The second thing I would do is get rid of the prescription companies or pharmaceutical companies' complete control over Washington. So between the pharmaceutical companies and the financial industry, they are the two top lobbying firms or lobbyist industry in Washington. So you're aware of that, right? It's usually
are
like
they bigger than the military-industrial complex?
Yes, I'm not saying as far as spending. I'm talking about as far as lobbying, the lobbying efforts that take place. So we need to just completely get rid of that. I mean, no more healthcare lobbies, no more financial lobbies, because at the end of the day, these are industries that are supposed to be taking care of people, right? So if you have all that money, that's really our money, but if you have all that money going into lobbying firms, you obviously have something to hide. That's how I see it. You have something that you're wanting perks or benefits that's going to at the expense of the American people, right? So those are two very easy things that would save, I believe, billions, if not trillions of dollars. And then the third thing that we talked about is with the insurance companies. I love your idea. There's lots of different ways to get rid of the insurance industry altogether, but I love this idea of the HSA. That's amazing, and I'm not sure why that isn't an option. That we could say, you know what, we want to do away with insurance. I think individual, we should be given that option. Not, do you want to use insurance or do you want to use HSA? I love that.
Cool. Absolutely. So I got another question for you.
Sure.
You're running for Georgia Superintendent of Schools at a time when many parents feel pushed out of the conversation.
Yes.
What do you think the education system has lost sight of over the years?
Educators believe that they're the parents. That's one problem. We have disempowered parents and overly empowered the education system. We need to go back. We need to turn that table around. I want to see us. One of my initiatives in the state of Georgia is for us to have true school choice. So we passed the Promise Scholarship Act last year. However, it's filled with red tape. Only $6,500 for families whose children attend the bottom 25 percentile academic schools, and only if you attend a private school, and only if you're currently in the public school system. So if your child's currently in a private school or homeschool, you're not eligible. If you're not in those regions with bottom 25 percentile schools, you're not eligible. If you want to homeschool your child with this voucher, you can't. So all these red tapes, we need to get rid of all of that. Increase it to the voucher to $8,000 and make it where any family can use it in any learning environment, right? Because parents know best what learning environment their child will thrive in. I personally homeschool my child, my oldest, and my youngest daughter, who we adopted from the foster care system. We put her in a Montessori-style school. We took her out of the public school system, and she thrived in a Montessori-style school. So parents that are engaged know best, and we just need to equip them with the resources and the tools so that they can be engaged and productive and walk alongside as partners in the school system, not as on the sidelines, watching everything happen from the sidelines.
Absolutely. And I'd like to touch down on what you just said because I think that you pointed out a very big problem without maybe even knowing that you pointed out a very big problem. But you were talking about the bill, and there's all this red tape, and it actually doesn't do anybody any good. And
Really?
I don't know if I'd bet a dime to a dollar that this is the reason, but this is the reason with a lot of bills and laws that this happens. So they come out with a good bill, and then one party takes a stance against it, and they add this in, and then they have to add this in, and by the time they end up with so much red tape, it's not a functionable bill, so it does
And
nothing.
the
Instead
lobbyists
of
have
just going with the good, right? So
and
it's
the
more about the
lobbyists
party than the people because it doesn't help anybody.
yes, and I'm pretty sure the teachers unions and all kinds of other lobbies had their pen at that bill as well. But you know what? If states like Florida can have a true school choice state, there's no reason why we can't do that in the state of Georgia. One of the things that I like about the state of Florida is that their funding, the money follows the child, not the institution. And here in Georgia, the money follows the institution. I want to change that. We have a very complicated and outdated QBE budgetary system for education that lends itself to confusion and corruption, frankly. And so we need to scrap all of that. I'm not saying that Florida is perfect, but definitely they have something that's working because they're number one in the nation. We're number 38.
Yeah, yeah. Go by the numbers. The numbers aren't going to lie. Yeah, if they can
No.
do it, if they can lead by example, other states can do it as well because it's proof of concept. It can be
There you
done.
go. There you go. Exactly.
Yeah,
And parents
yeah,
are
yeah.
engaged. Everyone knows in Florida that they're able to take that money and use it at charter schools, homeschool, you name it, private schools. So it lends itself to engagement of parents. I'm tired of hearing that parents don't care. Parents care. They just haven't been given the tools needed to fully engage with their child's education.
Absolutely. And there's a lack of transparency as well. That's why, the data systems that we're building or the data solutions to empower the people, there are data points in there, transparency, truth, constitution. There are all these guardrails and data points. So it's built off of this, but our old systems are built in the shadows. They're not built transparent. I think that's a big problem as well. Even with what you said with the pharmaceutical companies, if everything was transparent, then there would be nothing to hide. We need
Exactly.
more transparency.
There you go. And things that are easy for the common person to understand. If you need a
Yes.
lawyer to explain it, it's not transparent.
Well, I mean, isn't that where the doctrine void by vagueness goes? If an average citizen of average intelligence cannot read a law and understand it, then it's void because we have to understand the laws, and that I think is by design disconnect to take us out of the system in which we're trying to use these data solutions to bring us back in the system and make things transparent.
I love it, man. I really do hope that you guys are successful with it.
Thank you so much. I hope you're successful as well. I got a couple more questions. You good to go? All
Yes,
right.
let's do it.
How do we support teachers while restoring trust with parents and accountability to students?
Got it. One of the things that when I go around, the state, I've been campaigning, hard for the past couple of years. One of the things that I hear over and over and over again from teachers is behavior issues. That's what's leading so many teachers to burnout. That's what's causing the revolving door that we're having, that we're not really able to keep, especially new teachers, because it is so from what they taught you in school to the reality. There's such a disconnect, but the main issue is the behaviors. And so I'm on the steering committee of a program called LifeWise. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a national program where they go into the schools, Matt, and they partner with the schools. And as long as they have permission from the parents, they take the students whose parents gave permission, take them outside of the school for an hour, and they teach them biblically based character development. And in every single one of these schools that they're in, they have proven results of reducing anxiety, depression, and guess what? Behavior problems go down in these schools. And so when I am superintendent of schools, I'm going to green light LifeWise system wide. In fact, there's a bill, if you go to my website, there's a bill that will actually do just that, that will allow LifeWise to be kind of green lighted in the districts. And so we need that. And it's no cost to the school system, right? And this is something, a completely private program, but they come in and they partner with the schools to help teach biblically based character development. And we need more programs like that. We need to make sure that we are hearing the teachers when they're telling us that children, especially after COVID, that are having so many issues with social issues, behavioral issues, and the like.
That sounds like a very, very important program. And to touch down, I've talked to several educators, and everybody agrees that each child learns different. They have a learning, a different way of learning, and they soak things up differently. And that's why when we designed our curriculum now, it's not mandatory to use AI. It's elective if you elect to use it within the curriculum. But the students use it as an assistant. And it lets them move at their own. The teacher is a coach. The students use it as an assistant. It lets them move at their own pace, but it's usually about 10 times faster than without it. But it's responsible AI use. The person giving the command and then looking over things, not asking to take someone's job or do the job for them. It's just an enhancement.
I love that. Yes, for sure.
I would say if you could speak directly to parents, patients, and everyday Americans right now, what would you want them to hear?
I want them to hear that they still have the power. I think so many times when we watch the news or listen to, look at social media reels, very many people feel disempowered. And so when they feel disempowered, they just disengage. And I want to change that narrative. You are empowered. In fact, numbers give you that power. So get with groups that are speaking your language, that are speaking for truth to power, if you will, and have your voice heard. And don't disengage. Don't disengage because that is definitely the agenda from the lobbyists. They want Americans to not have the power of the vote anymore, or the being really involved with what's happening at all the different levels of policy making in government.
Well said. Well said. Is there anything that we left out that you want to touch down on? What I want you to do for our audience is send me the link to the bill or petition, whatever is getting signatures, so I can put it with the description. So anybody that's interested can go sign the bill. If it's going to help and not cost anything, it's a no-brainer. So if you'll send that to me via email when you leave the studio, I'll put that on the description so people can support the bill.
I will definitely do that. There's two bills on that. So the first one is for these the LifeWise program, and then the other one is to sunset the NPEC, the Non-Public Education Commission. So just like Donald Trump, clean house on the federal level, I want to do that on the state level to make sure that we have more trade schools available. We need to have more public-private partnerships with trade schools so that our kids, one of my initiatives, my other initiatives is that I want all of our graduates in Georgia to graduate with a high school diploma and a trade school certificate so that they are workforce ready on day one. So both of those bills are going to be on that link. But your listeners can also find it on my website, drnelvalee.com. And if you have any listeners who have friends or family in Georgia, or if any of your listeners are in Georgia, I would very much so love their vote, love their support, especially in the primaries coming up on May 19th.
Absolutely, absolutely. It has been a pleasure. Will you hang around just for a minute? Let me wrap this up.
Sure. Will do.
Dr. Nelva Lee, thank you for joining us for your service both in and out of a uniform. This is what the Patriot Party is about: truth over narrative, gratitude over entitlement, and empowering we the people through honest conversations and real solutions. Remember, America first, not America only, because we lead by example.